Hello, everybody. Welcome to Advanced Astrological and Philosophical Investigations into Postmodern Anomalies. Here's a preface and methodological framework. This report consolidates multidisciplinary findings from astrological scholars, philosophical researchers, cartographic analysts, and investigative historians. The focus is a rigorous examination of two subjects that exist at the interstice of documented history: speculative metaphysics and cultural mythogenesis. The analytical approach is syncretic, applying both traditional astrological frameworks, including mundane, esoteric, and karmic astrology, and postmodern philosophical critique to evaluate the claims, symbolic resonance, and potential ontological implications of these reported phenomena. The language employed is deliberately classical, avoiding contemporary technological metaphor to seek more perennial conceptual understanding. Subject 1. Alleged governmental experiments involving psychically attuned minors. Historical and allegorical correlates. Researchers note that the archetype of the state seeking to harness or control exceptional human abilities has deep roots. Astrological historians reference the Renaissance search for the puer divinus, divine child, and the astrological timing of search pursuits, often under ambiguous Jupiter-Neptune configurations. The 20th century context, marked by the Pluto and Leo generation, born circa 1939 to 1958, and its hallmark themes of individual power, creativity, and centralization of control, is cited as a critical backdrop. Documented programs and astrological alignment. The U.S. program, often termed Project Stargate, and analogous Soviet psychotronics research during the Cold War are points of tangible departure. While these largely involved adults, ancillary testimony and declassified documents hint at broader perimeters. Philosophical analysts posit that the stated goal of remote viewing or psychic intelligence gathering represents only a surface-level reading. A deeper, more unsettling thesis explored by field theorists suggests an attempt to engineer or isolate a specific human relationship with time and causality. This is not merely about gathering secrets, but about altering the foundational perceptive apparatus of consciousness. Astrological analysis of the phenomenon. Astrological professors propose that children purported to possess extreme psychic sensitivities may represent embodiments of unbound Uranus-Neptune contexts in their natal charts, or have significant planetary emphasis in the watery receptive signs Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio, particularly involving the Moon, Pluto, and the lunar nodes. The hypothesis is that certain planetary configurations at a collective level, like Neptune and Scorpio squaring Pluto and Leo during the late 1950s, 60s, may have created a generational potential for ruptures in the normative boundaries of consciousness, which institutional powers then sought to instrumentalize. Philosophical and ethical examination. Advanced philosophers frame this subject not as a question of did this happen, but as a profound epistemological crisis. The very idea represents the ultimate commodification of subjective experience and the state's intrusion into the sanctum of individual consciousness. It is the logical, grotesque endpoint of Cartesian mind-body dualism, combined with Faustian technocratic will. The psychic child becomes a resource, a living apparatus. Cartographers of conceptual space illustrate this as a forced mapping of the interior, numinous world onto the cold coordinate grid of state utility, a profound act of ontological violence. Field theory synthesis. Researchers operating under a synthesis of Sheldrake's morphic resonance and Jung's collective unconscious propose that if such experiments were conducted, their effects might not be limited to the participants. The intense, focused, and traumatic attempt to break open perceptual channels could have left imprints or wounds in the collective psychic field, particularly for those born with analogous astrological signatures. Reports of heightened intuitive or empathic sensitivities in subsequent generations, without clear explanation, are sometimes examined through this lens. Subject 2. The Montauk Narrative Complex. Genealogy of a Mythos. The Montauk Project narrative, as it exists in the postmodern landscape, is treated by collective researchers not as a verifiable historical event, but as a potent modern myth or thought form with traceable antecedents. Cartographers of narrative trace its lineage to earlier myths, the Wild Hunt, vanishing islands like High Brazel, stories of Faustian bargains, and 19th century tales of mad scientists. Its specific 20th century form is seen as a synthesis of authentic Cold War anxiety. The Montauk Air Force Station was real, science fiction tropes, and alleged experiential testimony. Core allegations and symbolic decoding. The central allegations, involuntary subject testing, time travel, reality manipulation, and contact with non-human intelligences, are analyzed symbolically. Astrological interpreters note the strong Saturn-Neptune structure, dissolution, and Pluto-Uranus transformative rupture symbolism pervading the tale. Philosophically, it is read as a parable of absolute liberation, mastery of time, corrupted by absolute control, military secrecy, and psychological domination. It represents the shadow of the Apollo mission, not a journey outward into space for all humankind, but a journey inward and backward through time for a select hidden few. Astrological and temporal considerations. Predictive astrologers have analyzed the purported timeline of the project, roughly 1970s to 1980s. This period saw Pluto in Libra, obsession with balance, relationships, and hidden partnerships, opposing Uranus in Aries, radical, explosive individualism, and squaring Saturn in Cancer, authority over security, and the emotional past. This T-square configuration is interpreted as a perfect astrological signature for a purported project seeking to shatter temporal law, Uranus, for reasons of power, Pluto, under the aegis of national security, Saturn in Cancer. The location, Montauk, NY, is also astrologically mapped to the USA's natal chart, with some speculating it falls in a sector related to secrets, institutions, and the collective unconscious. Philosophical implications. For advanced philosophy, Montauk is a nightmare mirror of Kantian critique. If Kant established that space and time are the a priori forms of human intuition, then Montauk represents the attempt to technologically seize and weaponize these very forms. It is the reduction of time, the universal condition of possibility for experience, to a mere tool, a weapon, a playground. This represents a form of metaphysical tyranny far beyond political oppression. Field theorists specializing in consciousness studies speculate that the enduring power of the narrative may stem from its symbolic representation of a genuine, if unconscious, human transition, our dawning, uncomfortable awareness that time and reality may be far more malleable than classical materialism allowed, coupled with a deep fear of who might control that malleability. Synthesis of subjects, a unified field perspective. The collective analysis finds a profound symbolic link between the two subjects. Both concern the attempted instrumentalization of innate human potentials, the intuitive, psychic, and the very fabric of temporal perception. Both are shrouded in the dialectic of ultimate freedom and ultimate control. Astrologically, they are seen as two manifestations of the same disruptive planetary energy complex, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, working upon the collective psyche during the late 20th century. The psychic children experiments represent an attempt to weaponize the internal, subjective space of consciousness. The Montauk narrative represents an attempt to weaponize the external, objective framework of time and reality. Together, they form a complete picture of a purported postmodern occult project to dominate both the inner and outer conditions of existence. Conclusion. This report does not seek to prove the empirical reality of these events as commonly described. Rather, it concludes that these narrative complexes function as indispensable cultural and psychic symptoms. They are the dark, mythic expression of humanity's ambiguous transition into an age where consciousness, time, and reality are no longer seen as fixed givens, but as potentials to be explored and potentially exploited. Their persistent hold on the contemporary imagination, as analyzed through astrological cycles and philosophical critique, suggests they address a profound, unresolved anxiety at the heart of the postmodern condition. In a universe where everything may be possible, what becomes of the human soul, and who holds the keys? The continuing study of these fields is recommended not for evidence of time travel, but for evidence of our own evolving and often conflicted relationship with the mysterious foundations of our being.